The morning sun painted the broken city in shades of orange and gold. June wiped down the metal counter of his small food shack one more time. The shipping container that served as his restaurant looked nothing like the fancy places that used to exist before the world fell apart. But it was clean, and it was his. He looked out at the settlement that had grown around the old highway. Families lived in patched tents and rebuilt vehicles. Children played between stacks of salvaged metal and plastic. Everyone worked together to survive another day. The government had been gone for 3 years now. The big companies had taken their fancy machines and left for other planets. Earth was supposed to be dying, but people like these refused to give up. June lit the flame under his cooking pot. The blue fire danced as he added water and began to heat it. Soon the smell of real food would fill the air, not the gray blocks that the food machines made, real food that his grandmother had taught him to cook before she died. The first customer of the day was Old Man Park. He limped over on his metal leg, the one he had made himself after losing the real one in the resource wars. Park carried a small bag of scrap metal. "Good morning, Uncle Park," June said with a smile. "The usual today?" Park nodded and placed the metal pieces on the counter. "Found these yesterday? Should be enough for a bowl." June looked at the metal. It was barely worth anything, but he took it anyway. He had learned long ago that dignity was more important than profit. "Sit down, Uncle. I will make you something special today." As Park found a seat on one of the old car seats that served as chairs, June began to cook. He chopped vegetables that he had grown in the small garden behind his shack. The knife moved quickly in his practiced hands. Onions, carrots, and some green leaves went into the hot oil. A sizzling sound made his mouth water. More people began to appear as the smell of cooking food spread through the settlement. There was Mrs. Kim with her 2 young children. Her husband had died in the wars, but she worked hard collecting clean water for the community. Behind her came young Do-yoon, barely 16 but already skilled at fixing the solar panels that gave them electricity. "Mama, it smells so good," said little Minji, Mrs. Kim's daughter. The girl was only 5 years old, but already knew that good food was something special. June smiled at the child. "Today I made extra rice. You can have a big bowl." Mrs. Kim tried to pay with the few coins she had, but June waved her money away. "Children eat free here. You know the rules." As he served the steaming bowls of rice topped with vegetables and a small piece of meat, June felt the same satisfaction he had felt every day for the past 2 years. When the world had collapsed, when the governments had failed and the corporations had fled, people had told him to give up his dream of cooking. They said food was just fuel now. Survival was all that mattered. But June disagreed. He believed that how you ate was how you lived. If you only ate gray blocks from machines, you forgot what it meant to be human. But when you shared a meal that someone had made with care, you remembered that life was about more than just staying alive. The morning rush continued until every seat was full. Workers getting ready for their daily jobs. Families sharing breakfast. Together, even some of the tough security guards who protected the settlement came by for their morning meal. Everyone paid what they could. Some brought trade goods. Others brought favors or promises to help with repairs. June never turned anyone away. If someone had no money and nothing to trade, they could work in his garden for an hour or help clean the shack. But most of the time, he just gave food to those who needed it. The settlement had become like a family, and families took care of each other. Around midday, when the lunch crowd had thinned out, June stepped outside to tend his garden. The small plot behind his shack was his pride and joy. Rows of vegetables grew in carefully maintained soil. He had learned to make fertilizer from food scraps and had built a water collection system from old plastic bottles as he watered his plants. He noticed something strange in the sky. 3 dark shapes moved slowly across the blue background. At first he thought they might be clouds, but clouds did not move in straight lines. He shaded his eyes with his hand and looked more carefully. The shapes were growing larger, were coming closer to Earth. By evening, everyone in the settlement was talking about the ships in the sky. Some people were scared. They remembered stories of aliens from before the collapse. Stories that usually ended badly for humans. A few families packed their belongings and left during the night, heading for the deep forests where they thought they could hide. But June did not leave. He had built something good here, something that mattered. If these were the last days of his small restaurant, he would spend them doing what he had always done, cooking good food for good people. As the sun set and the alien ships hung like dark stars in the sky, June prepared for the dinner service. He chopped vegetables by the light of his small solar lamp. He seasoned his broth with the last of his precious spices. If tomorrow brought the end of everything, and tonight his neighbors would eat well. Old Man Park was the last customer of the evening. He sat at the counter, slowly eating his soup. "You are not afraid, young June?" he asked. June considered the question as he cleaned his cooking tools. "I am afraid," he said finally. "But I am more afraid of becoming someone who runs away from what is right. This place, these people, this food, this is who I am. If I run away from that, then I am already lost." Park nodded slowly. "Your grandmother would be proud." As the old man left, June looked up at the alien ships one more time. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring. His small corner of the broken world was warm, fed, and full of hope. That had to be enough. The alien ships had been in the sky for 3 days. Most of the settlement had emptied out as families fled to the hills or deeper into the ruins of the old city. Only about 30 people remained, including June. He kept his food shack open every day, serving whoever stayed behind. On the 4th morning, June was slicing vegetables for the lunch prep when he heard a strange humming sound. The air seemed to vibrate around him. He looked up to see a small silver craft landing in the empty lot next to his shack. The ship was smooth and quiet, nothing like the loud machines humans used to build. 3 figures stepped out of the craft. June had never seen anything like them before. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with blue-tinted skin that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. They wore fitted suits that looked like they were made from liquid metal. Their faces were similar. 2 humans but longer, with large dark eyes and no hair. The one in front was clearly the leader. She moved with confidence and purpose. The other 2 stayed close behind her, one carrying what looked like a scanning device, the other with her hand near what was probably a weapon. June watched them approach his shack. His heart was beating fast, but he did not run. Instead, he did what he always did when customers arrived. He smiled and called out, "Good morning. What can I get you today?" The alien stopped walking. The leader tilted her head to one side, as if she was trying to understand something confusing. Said something in a musical language that June could not understand. Then she touched a small device on her collar and spoke again. "You are not afraid," she said. Her voice was clear now, translated by her machine. "Should I be?" June asked, continuing to chop his vegetables. "Are you here to hurt me?" The 3 aliens looked at each other. The leader stepped closer to the counter. "We are here to study your people. I am Commander Naya. This is Vera and Kira." June nodded politely. "I am June. Welcome to the last bowl." As they talked, something interesting happened. Commander Naya's nose began to twitch. She looked around with confusion. "What is that sensation?" she asked. "What sensation?" June replied. "We're in the air. It makes me feel ... Naya paused, searching for words. "It makes me want to come closer." June realized she was smelling his cooking. On the stove, a pot of beef broth had been simmering since early morning. The rich smell filled the air around his shack. He also had onions and garlic cooking in oil, preparing for the lunch rush that probably would not come today. "That is food," June explained. "I am cooking lunch. Are you hungry?" The alien called Vera stepped forward. She was carrying the scanning device and had been pointing it at everything around them. "Our analysis shows organic compounds being heated and combined. But the chemical reactions are creating unexpected results. Would you like to try some?" June offered. Kara, the one who looked like a soldier, spoke sharply to Naya in their musical language. June could tell she was warning her commander about something. But Naya held up her hand for silence. "Our bodies can process most organic matter," Naya said slowly. "But we have not eaten prepared food for many generations. We use nutrient synthesis." "Nutrient Synthesis, June asked. Our machines create perfect nutrition, exact proteins, vitamins, and minerals delivered in efficient form. No waste, no time spent on preparation. June made a face. That sounds terrible. Why terrible? Vera asked, genuinely curious. It's completely logical. Instead of answering with words, June ladled some of his beef broth into a small bowl. He added some cooked rice and vegetables, then sprinkled green onions on top. Soup steamed in the cool morning air. Try this, he said, holding out the bowl. The three aliens stared at the food as if it might attack them. Finally, Naya took the bowl. She held it close to her face and breathed in deeply. Her large dark eyes grew even larger. The scent is very strong, she said. My body is reacting in ways I do not understand. That is called being hungry, June said with a smile. Naya lifted the bowl to her lips and took a small sip. Immediately, her eyes closed and she made a soft sound. She stood perfectly still for several seconds, then opened her eyes and stared at June as if seeing him for the first time. What did you do to me? She whispered. I gave you soup, June replied. Vera and Kira moved closer to their commander, concerned, but Naya took another sip, and then another. Soon she was drinking the soup quickly, making small, satisfied sounds.
Commander,
Kira said in her translated voice, your behavior is unusual. We should return to the ship. But Naya was not listening. She had finished the soup and was looking at the empty bowl with something like sadness. Can you make more of this? She asked June. Of course, I have a whole pot. As June refilled her bowl, Vera stepped forward. May I analyze the remaining liquid? You can try some too, June offered. Vera hesitated, then accepted a small cup of broth. She sipped it carefully, running her scanner over the liquid at the same time. Suddenly she stopped scanning and just drank, her eyes wide with amazement. This is impossible, she said. The combination of flavors is creating neural responses that our science says should not exist. Even Kira, the serious soldier, eventually tried the soup. She drank it more slowly than the others, but June could see that she was affected too. Her rigid posture relaxed slightly, and she actually sat down on one of his car seat chairs. Your nutrient synthesis, June said as he served them more food. Does it taste like anything? Tastes inefficient, Naya replied, but she said it while eating a spoonful of rice. Flavor serves no biological purpose. Maybe not, June agreed. But it makes you happy, right? The three aliens looked at each other. Happiness was clearly not something they thought about much. We should go, Kira said, but she made no move to stand up. Wait, Naya said. I want to understand this process. Why do you create these chemical combinations? June spent the next hour showing them how he cooked. He explained how different ingredients work together, how heat changed the taste of things, how timing mattered. The aliens asked many questions and took many measurements with their devices. But most importantly, they kept eating. June made them try his kimchi, his seasoned vegetables, and even a small piece of grilled meat. Each new taste seemed to surprise them more than the last. When they finally left, Naya turned back at the door of their ship. We will return tomorrow, she said. I will be here, June replied. As their ship lifted silently into the sky, June cleaned his dishes and smiled. He'd just fed 3 aliens, and they had liked it. Maybe the world was not ending after all. Maybe it was just changing into something new. Word about June's food had spread through the alien fleet faster than wildfire. Every day now, more of them came to his small shack. They arrived in groups of 2 or 3, always polite, always curious. June had learned their names and began to understand their different personalities. Naya came every morning at exactly 8 o'clock. She had developed a love for his rice porridge with dried seaweed. Vera preferred the fermented vegetables, fascinated by what she called controlled biological decay. Kira took longer to warm up, but eventually admitted she enjoyed the spicy soup that made her feel alert and energized. On the 6th day, a new ship landed. This one was bigger and darker than the others. Out stepped an alien that was different. From the rest, she was taller and more muscular, with scars across her blue skin. Her suit looked like armor, and she carried weapons openly. And when she walked, it was with the careful steps of someone always ready to fight. That is Zephyr and Naya, explained to June in a quiet voice. She is warrior class. She believes your food is making us weak. Zephora approached the counter with suspicion in her dark eyes. She sniffed the air and frowned. So this is the human who has poisoned my soldiers with his chemicals. I'd prefer to think of it as seasoning, June replied calmly, continuing to stir his soup. Would you like to try some? I do not eat primitive waste, Zephora said coldly. June nodded and kept cooking. I had dealt with difficult customers before. That's fine. You can just watch. But as the morning went on, Zephora found herself unable to leave. She stood at the edge of the eating area, watching as her fellow aliens ate with expressions of joy she had never seen before. Her nose twitched as the smells of cooking meat and spices filled the air. Your people were warriors once, June said. To her, as he prepared a special dish, before the machines and the perfect nutrition. How do you know this? Zephora demanded. All people were warriors once. We had to be, to survive. But being a warrior is not just about fighting. It is about protecting what matters. June was making bulgogi, thin slices of beef marinated in sweet and salty sauce, then grilled over high heat. The meat sizzled and sent up clouds of aromatic smoke. It was a dish that required skill, timing, and attention. Like battle, June thought. This meat, he said to Zephora, it comes from an animal that was hunted. The spices come from plants that were gathered. The fire must be controlled, or the food burns. Every meal is a small war against hunger. Despite herself, Zephora stepped closer. The smell of the grilling meat triggered something deep in her alien biology. Her people had evolved from hunters, even if they had forgotten it. One taste, June offered. If you hate it, I will never ask again. Zephora looked around at the other aliens, all watching. Her with interest. She had a reputation to maintain, but the smell of the meat was making her mouth water in a way she did not understand. She took the small portion June offered and bit into it slowly. The combination of sweet, salty, and smoky flavors hit her senses like an explosion. But more than that, something ancient in her mind woke up. The satisfaction of a successful hunt. The joy of feeding the pack. The bond between warriors who shared their kill. Zephora closed her eyes and finished the meat in silence. When she opened them again, she looked at June with something like respect. I understand now why they keep coming back, she said quietly. Another new arrival that afternoon was Lyra, a diplomatic attached from the alien government. She was smaller and more delicate than the others, with pale blue skin and nervous movements. She had come to investigate reports of cultural contamination among the fleet personnel. My physiology cannot process the same proteins as the others, she explained to June apologetically. I should not even be here. June studied her carefully. What can you eat? Synthetic nutrients only. Anything organic causes ... problems. But June was already thinking. He went to his garden and gathered fresh vegetables, young leaves, and herbs. He prepared a delicate broth using only plant matter, seasoned with gentle spices. He added thin slices of cucumber and radish, creating a light soup that looked like art in a bowl. Try this, he said, offering her the soup. Lyra hesitated, then took a small sip. Her large eyes filled with liquid. I have not tasted anything like this in 50 years, she whispered. I thought I would never again experience flavor. As she drank the soup, tears began to flow down her blue cheeks. The other aliens watched in amazement. Crying was something their people rarely did anymore. Why does it make you sad? June asked gently. Not sad, Lyra said, wiping her eyes. The word in your language is ... grateful. So very grateful.
Ow.
The day continued with more aliens arriving. Each one had different needs, different biology, different personalities, but June adapted to each of them. For the engineer Hannah, he made crispy fried vegetables that satisfied her need for texture. For the scientist Rena, he prepared fermented foods that fascinated her with their complex bacterial cultures by evening. June's small shack was busier than it had ever been. Aliens and the few remaining humans sat together, sharing meals and trying to communicate despite the language barriers. Children from the settlement played between the tables while alien scientists watched with curiosity. Old Man Park sat next to Commander Naya, both of them enjoying bowls of soup. Neither could understand the other's language, but they had developed a friendship based on shared appreciation for good food. "Your species is remarkable," Naya said to June as he cleaned up for the day. "You create joy from simple ingredients. You build community around shared meals. You make strangers into friends. Food is just the beginning," June replied. "When people eat together, they remember they are not so different." Vera looked up from her scanner, which had been analyzing everything all day. "My instruments cannot measure what happens here. Social bonding, the emotional responses, the cultural exchange. It is all beyond our science. Some things cannot be measured," June said. "They can only be experienced." As the aliens prepared to return to their ships for the night, Zephyra approached June one more time. "Tomorrow I will bring my squad. They need to understand what I learned today." "What did you learn?" June asked. Zephyra thought for a moment. "That strength comes in many forms. Sometimes the greatest warriors are those who feed others instead of fighting them."
After the last
customer left, June sat alone in his shack and looked up at the alien ships in the sky. They no longer seemed threatening. They looked like stars that had come down to visit Earth. His small restaurant had become a bridge between two species. That bridge was growing stronger every day. He smiled as he planned tomorrow's menu. There would be more aliens to feed, more flavors to share, more connections to build. The collapse of human civilization had seemed like the end of everything. But maybe it was actually the beginning of something much bigger. 2 weeks had passed since the first contact, and June's food shack had become the busiest place in what remained of the settlement. Every morning, a line of both humans and aliens waited for breakfast. The sight had become so normal that even the children no longer stared at the tall blue figures, but not everyone was happy about these changes. On a cold Tuesday morning, a sleek black ship landed near June's shack. This one was different from the others. It was larger and more intimidating, with sharp edges and dark windows. The ship's arrival made all the other aliens suddenly nervous. Out stepped a figure that commanded immediate respect. She was taller than even Zephyra, with skin that was deeper blue and eyes that seemed to see everything. Her uniform had more decorations, and when she walked, every alien in the area stood straighter. "Visid model Thada," Naya whispered to June. "She is here to investigate us." Vice-Admiral Thara approached the food shack with the expression of someone who had already made up her mind about what she would find. She looked at the mixed crowd of humans and aliens eating together and frowned deeply. "Commander Nayashi said in a voice that could cut metal, "Explain this situation." "We are conducting cultural research," Naya replied carefully, "learning about human food preparation methods." "Research," Thara repeated coldly. She looked at Vera, who was teaching young Minji how to use chopsticks while the human child giggled with delight. "This looks more like contamination." June continued cooking while listening to their conversation. He was making dumplings, folding thin dough around a mixture of vegetables and meat. His hands moved quickly and skillfully, sealing each dumpling with practiced twists. "Sir," he said politely to Thara, "would you like to try some food while you investigate?" Thara turned her cold gaze on him. "I did not come here to participate in this primitive ritual. Just asking," June said with a shrug. He dropped several dumplings into boiling water and watched them bob to the surface. As the morning went on, Thara interviewed each of the aliens who had been visiting the shack. She asked sharp questions about their duties, their loyalty, and their mental state, but June noticed that she kept glancing at the dumplings cooking in his pot. The smell was getting stronger as the dumplings finished cooking. June lifted them out with a slotted spoon and placed them in a steaming basket. The aroma of cooked dough, seasoned meat, and fresh herbs filled the air around the shack. "These personnel have been neglecting their duties," Thara announced to Naya. "They spend too much time here instead of on their ships." "Their work performance has actually improved," Naya replied. "Morale is higher than it has been in years." "Morale," Thera said with disgust. Motion makes soldiers weak. June served the hot dumplings to his regular customers. Old Man Park bit into one and smiled with satisfaction. Zephora ate hers in 2 quick bites, then immediately ordered more. Even the shy Lyra had learned to enjoy the vegetable dumplings. That June made specially for her, but it was Vera who caused the real problem. She was sitting at a table with Mrs. Kim, trying to explain how fermentation worked using simple words and hand gestures. Mrs. Kim was showing her how to fold dumpling dough, and Vera was laughing at her clumsy attempts. Scientist Vera Thera called sharply. "Return to your ship immediately." Vera looked up, dumpling dough on her fingers. "But I am learning important cultural information. You are wasting time on irrelevant activities." "With respect, Admiral," Vera said quietly, "I think you are wrong." The entire shack went silent. Even the human children stopped playing. Speaking back to a superior was apparently a serious offense among the aliens. Thera's eyes became dangerous. "Explain yourself, scientist." Vera stood up, still holding the piece of dumpling dough. "For 3 days, I have been learning to make food with my hands. It is the most complex chemical process I have ever studied. The timing, the temperature, the interaction of ingredients. It requires precision, patience, and intuition. These humans have mastered sciences we never considered." "It is just cooking," Thera said dismissively. "Is it?" Vera challenged. "Watch this." She took the dumpling dough and began to fold it around a small portion of filling, copying what Mrs. Kim had shown her. Her first attempts were clumsy, but she kept trying. When she finally sealed the dumpling properly, Mrs. Kim clapped her hands with delight. "Do you see?" Vera asked Thera. "She is happy because I learned something she taught me. Not because it serves any logical purpose, but because teaching and learning create bonds between people. This is why they survived when their government collapsed. They take care of each other." Thera stared at the crude dumpling in Vera's hands. "This proves nothing." But June had been watching the Vice Admiral carefully. He saw how her nose twitched. When the dumplings were cooking, he saw how her eyes followed the food when he served it to others. He saw the slight tension in her jaw when she claimed not to be interested. "Admiral," he said quietly, "would you like to try making a dumpling?" "Absolutely not." "It might help your investigation," June suggested, "to understand what your people are doing here." Thera looked around at all the aliens watching her. It was clearly uncomfortable being the center of attention, but her pride would not let her back down from a challenge. "Very well," she said stiffly, "for research purposes only." June handed her a piece of dough and showed her how to flatten it. Then he placed a small amount of filling in the center and demonstrated the folding technique. Thera watched intently, then tried to copy his movements. Her first dumpling fell apart completely. The second one leaked filling everywhere. But on the third try, she managed to seal it properly. When she succeeded, something strange happened. A tiny smile appeared on her stern face before she could stop it. "Now we cook it," June said, dropping her dumpling into the boiling water along with several others. As they waited for the dumplings to finish cooking, Thera found herself standing closer to the pot than she had intended. The smell was making her feel hungry in a way she had not experienced for many years. When the dumpling was ready, June placed it in a small bowl and handed it to her with chopsticks. "Be careful, it's hot." Thera lifted the dumpling carefully and took a small bite. The flavors hit her immediately. The soft dough, the savory filling, the hint of herbs and spices. But more than that, she could taste the effort that had gone into making it. The care, the patience, the desire to create something good. For several seconds, she stood perfectly still, chewing slowly. Then she finished the dumpling and looked around at all the faces watching her. Humans and aliens alike were waiting to see her reaction. "It is ... double quotes," she began, then stopped. She seemed to be struggling for words. "It is adequate for a first attempt." But June saw the truth in her eyes. She had felt what all the others had felt. The connection, the satisfaction, the simple joy of sharing food made with care. From that day forward, Vice Admiral Thera began visiting the shack regularly. She claimed it was for continued investigation, but everyone knew better. She always ordered the same thing: dumplings that she had helped to make. And as the days passed, something beautiful began to happen. The aliens started bringing gifts from their ships, advanced tools that made June's cooking easier, water purifiers for the settlement, medical supplies for the humans who needed them. In return, June began teaching them more than just cooking. He showed them how to grow vegetables in poor soil, how to preserve food without refrigeration, how to make a community work when resources were scarce. But most importantly, he taught them about hope, about finding joy in small things, about taking care of others even when you had very little yourself. The settlement that had been dying was now thriving. The humans who had stayed were healthier and happier than they had been since before the collapse. And the aliens were discovering parts of themselves they thought they had lost forever. Late at night, when the shack was closed and everyone had gone home, June would sometimes find one or two aliens still sitting at his tables. They would be talking quietly or just enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. They had found something here that their advanced civilization could not provide, had found a place where they belonged. The message came early in the morning while June was preparing rice for breakfast. A bright beam of light shot down from the largest alien ship in the sky, creating a hologram in the center of the settlement. The image showed an alien even more impressive than Thara, with darker blue skin and ceremonial robes that seemed to move on their own. "Citizens of the Vale Thara fleet," the hologram announced in a voice that echoed across the settlement. "You have 48 hours to complete your mission and depart this world. Any personnel who have been compromised by local influences will face immediate correction upon return." The hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving an uncomfortable silence. June looked around at the aliens who had become his friends and customers. Their faces showed fear, sadness, and something else he had not seen before: rebellion. "That was High Council leader Yerrick Naya," explained quietly. "He speaks for our entire government." "What does correction mean?" June asked, though he suspected. He did not want to know the answer. "Memory adjustment," Vera said, her voice barely a whisper. "They will remove all trace of our time here. We will forget everything we learned, everyone we met." Yominji, who had been playing with blocks nearby, ran over to Vera. "Are you going away?" she asked with tears in her eyes. Vera knelt down and hugged the little girl. "I do not want to, small one." But the message from the High Council was just the beginning of June's problems. Later that morning, 3 large vehicles arrived at the settlement. They were human-made but looked new and expensive. Out stepped men and women in clean suits, carrying briefcases and scanning devices. Their leader was a tall man with gray hair and cold eyes. He walked directly to June's shack and placed a thick folder on the counter. "Mr. June," he said in a businesslike voice, "I am Director Walsh from TerraCorp. We need to talk." "I do not know any TerraCorp," June replied, continuing to cook. "We are what remains of Earth's legitimate government," Walsh explained. "We have been monitoring the alien contact situation, and we have a proposal for you." Walsh opened his folder and showed June papers covered with numbers and charts. "Your food preparation methods have clearly impressed these aliens. We want you to scale up production. Industrial kitchens, automated systems, mass distribution. We can make your recipes available to every human settlement on Earth." "That sounds terrible," June said flatly. Walsh looked surprised. "It would make you rich. It would give humanity an advantage in negotiations with the aliens. My food works because I make it with care, one bowl at a time." "You cannot automate care." "Everything can be automated with the right technology," Walsh insisted. "The aliens have already given you some of their equipment. With our backing, you could have much more." As they argued, more TerraCorp people began setting up equipment. Around the settlement, they were scanning everything, taking measurements, and interviewing the few humans who remained. Old Man Park hobbled over to June's counter, looking worried. "These corporation people," he said quietly, "they feel wrong. Like vultures circling a wounded animal." June agreed. He had dealt with corporate representatives before the collapse. They saw everything as a resource to be exploited, including people. The situation got worse when the aliens learned about the TerraCorp proposal. Naya was furious. "They want to turn your gift into a weapon," she said. "To use our appreciation for your food as a tool for negotiation That is exactly what we want, Walsh said, overhearing the conversation. Humanity needs every advantage we can get. This is not an advantage, Zephyra growled, her warrior instincts making her protective. This is an insult to everything June has created here. The tension continued to build throughout the day. TerraCorp people tried to convince the remaining humans to leave with them, promising safety and comfortable lives in their corporate settlements. Some were tempted, especially families with young children, but the real crisis came that evening. When 3 more alien ships landed near the settlement, these were military vessels, bigger and more threatening than any that had come before. Armed aliens in battle armor emerged and took positions around the area. Retrieval squad, Kira explained. To June, they are here to take us home, whether we want to go or not. The military commander was an alien named General Kor. He was massive, even by their standards. With scars covering his blue skin and weapons built into his armor. When he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding metal. All Vale Thara personnel will report to the transport ships immediately, he announced. Any who resist will be sedated and carried aboard. And what about us humans? Director Walsh asked, stepping forward boldly. General Kor looked at him with contempt. You'll be classified as a developing species and left to your own fate. This world will be marked as off-limits to prevent further contamination. Off-limits means no trade, no technology, no help, Naya translated for June. They will abandon Earth completely. The settlement was now surrounded by both corporate humans and alien military forces. The few remaining human families huddled together near June's shack, frightened and confused. The aliens who had become part of their community stood nearby, unwilling to leave but afraid to disobey their orders. In the middle of all this chaos, June made an announcement that surprised everyone. I am cooking dinner, he said calmly. Anyone who wants to eat is welcome. This is not the time for food, Director Walsh protested. This is exactly the time for food, June replied. When everything is falling apart, we remember what matters, by taking care of each other. Despite the armed soldiers and corporate officials, despite the threats and ultimatums, people began to gather around June's shack. The humans came first, then the aliens who had been ordered to leave. Even some of the military aliens looked longingly at the food, but stayed at their posts. June cooked as if it was just another normal evening. Rice, vegetables, soup, and meat, all prepared with the same care he had always shown. The smell of his cooking filled the air, creating a small bubble of normalcy in the middle of the crisis. You cannot ignore this situation by pretending it is dinner time, General Kor said, his voice threatening. I am not ignoring anything, June replied. I am dealing with it the only way I know how, by feeding people who are hungry. As the sun set, an incredible thing happened. Nea, Vera, Kira, Zephora, Lyra, and even Visad Merylthera all stepped away from the transport ships and sat down. At June's tables, they were formally refusing orders, risking everything they had ever known. We choose to stay, Naya announced to General Kor. We formally request asylum with the human settlement. That is treason, Kor replied coldly. Then we are traitors, Vera said, taking a spoonful of soup. But we are also free. The standoff was set. On one side, the alien military and human corporations who wanted to control the situation. The other side, a small group of humans. And aliens who had found something worth protecting in a simple food shack. The battle for the future would not be fought with weapons or technology. It would be fought with the choice between control and community, between efficiency and connection, between the old ways that had failed and something entirely new. And at the center of it all was June, cooking dinner for anyone who was hungry, proving that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply care for others. The morning of the deadline arrived with gray clouds covering the sky. General Kor and his soldiers stood ready to take the defecting aliens by force. Director Walsh and his TerraCorp team had their own plans to seize control of June's operation. Both groups waited for the other to make the first move. But June had a different idea. General Kor, he called out from his food shack. Director Walsh, I would like to invite you both to breakfast. Both men looked at him as if he had lost his mind. This is not a social gathering, General Kor rumbled. Everything is a social Gathering if you do it right, June replied. Besides, I have a proposal for both of you. What kind of proposal? Walsh asked suspiciously. Let me cook for your leaders. All of them. If they taste what I make and still want to destroy this place, I will not resist. General Kor laughed, a sound like rocks falling. You think food will change the mind of the High Council? I think understanding will, June said. And understanding starts with sharing a meal. It took 3 hours of arguing, but eventually both sides agreed. General Kor contacted the alien flagship and arranged for High Council leader Yarek to visit the settlement. Director Walsh called his superiors and convinced them to send their top executives. While they waited, June began the most important. Cooking of his life. Prepared dishes that told the story of humanity. Simple rice that showed how people could take basic ingredients and create sustenance. Fermented vegetables that demonstrated patience and planning for the future. Soup made from scraps and bones that proved humans could create abundance from almost nothing. But the most important dish was one he had never made before. He combined ingredients in a way that represented cooperation, human vegetables grown in earth soil, seasoned with spices that aliens had brought from their home worlds, cooked using technology that both species had shared. When the alien High Council ship landed, it was unlike anything that had come before. It was beautiful rather than threatening, made of materials that seemed to glow with their own light. Council leader Jarek emerged wearing robes that shifted color like aurora in the night sky. He was ancient even by alien standards, with skin so pale it was almost white and eyes that held the wisdom of centuries. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had guided his people through wars and peace, triumph and disaster. Show me this human who has corrupted my fleet, he said to General Kor. June stepped forward and bowed politely. Welcome to my restaurant, honored leader. Please sit wherever you are comfortable. The TerraCorp executives arrived in a sleek aircraft that landed with corporate precision. They wore expensive suits and carried devices that probably cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Their leader was a woman named CEO Martinez, whose every movement radiated power and control. This is the primitive who has been interfering with our negotiations, she said to Director Walsh. Both groups of leaders sat at separate tables, eyeing each other with suspicion and distrust. The aliens who had chosen to stay with June gathered. Nervously nearby, the human families of the settlement watched from a respectful distance. June began to serve the meal he had prepared. He started with simple tea, showing how hot water and dried leaves could create something that calmed the mind and opened the senses. Then came small portions of different dishes, each one designed to tell part of the human story. High Council. Leader Yarek took his first sip of tea and paused. His ancient eyes closed for a moment, then opened with surprise. This liquid contains no nutrition, yet it provides satisfaction. Comfort, June explained. Sometimes the body needs more than just fuel. CEO Martinez tried the fermented vegetables and made a face. This tastes ... strange. Sour. That is time, June said. Those vegetables were prepared weeks ago. They've been changing slowly, becoming something new, like people do. As the meal continued, something remarkable began to happen. The leaders started asking questions instead of making demands. They wanted to know how the food was made, why it tasted different from their synthetic alternatives. What made people willing to spend time and effort on something so seemingly inefficient? June answered each question while continuing to serve. He explained how cooking required patience, how sharing meals built trust, how taking care of others created communities that could survive any disaster. Your people fought wars over resources, Yarek observed, yet you give food freely to those who cannot pay. Hunger makes people desperate, June replied. Desperate people make bad decisions. It is better to share what you have and keep everyone thinking clearly. CEO Martinez studied the mixed group of humans and aliens eating together. This cooperation you have achieved here, could it work on a larger scale? It already is working. June said, every person who eats here goes back to their family or their ship and shares what they learned. The ideas spread like seeds. The most important moment came when June served the final dish, the one that combined ingredients from both worlds cooked using shared technology, seasoned with cooperation itself. When both leaders tasted it, they experienced something neither had expected. They tasted the future. High Council leader HFY set down his spoon and looked around at his people who had chosen to stay. "They are not corrupted," he said slowly. "They are evolved." "Evolved how?" General Kor asked. "They have remembered what we forgot, that survival is not just about living. It is about living with purpose, with connection, with joy." CEO Martinez was studying her scanner readings with amazement. The nutritional content is actually inferior to our synthetic alternatives, but the psychological and social benefits are off the charts. "Numbers cannot measure everything," June said gently. Both leaders spent the rest of the day in the settlement, watching how the humans and aliens interacted. They saw children playing together despite language barriers. They saw warriors learning to grow vegetables. They saw scientists discovering that wisdom could come from grandmothers as well as laboratories. When evening came, both groups made announcements that surprised everyone. "The Valethera Consortium will establish a permanent cultural exchange station here," Yarrick declared. "Those who wish to stay and learn will be supported, not punished." "TerraCorp will provide funding and resources for this settlement," CEO Martinez added. "But we will not interfere with its operation. Some things are too valuable to control." Crisis was over, but the real work was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, June's small food shack became the center of something unprecedented. The first truly integrated human-alien community, where both species learned from each other as equals. June found himself cooking for larger crowds every day. But he never lost the personal touch that made his food special. He trained others to help him, both human and alien, teaching them that the secret ingredient was always care for others. Naya became his first assistant, learning to make perfect rice while managing the cultural exchange programs. Vera established gardens where both species could grow food together. Sephora trained security forces in the art of protection without aggression. The relationships that had begun over shared meals grew into something deeper. June found himself particularly close to Naya, whose curiosity about human culture matched his interest in learning about the stars. Their friendship bloomed into something that neither species had thought possible. Years later, when children who had grown up in the integrated settlement became the first generation to see both species as simply people, June would look back. On that morning when 3 alien ships first appeared in the sky, he had thought it might be the end of the world. Instead, it had been the beginning of a new one. The small food shack was still there, still serving meals made with love and care. But now it stood at the center of a thriving city, where humans and aliens worked together to build a future that neither could have achieved alone. And every evening, when the day's work was done, June would still cook dinner for anyone who was hungry. Because some things, the most important things, never needed to change.